Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, my name is Ariel and I am an ICU registered nurse. I am a single mom of a soon-to-be 13-year-old daughter, and I make videos on here about nursing for nursing students, nurses, anybody who's curious. So if you are not yet subscribed and you want to join this amazing family that we have here on YouTube, go ahead and hit the subscribe button down below. Also, to all my oldie but goodies who've been riding with me for a very long time, thank you so much for coming back. I appreciate all the love and support. And so for today's video, what we're going to talk about is ICU nursing. If you guys are new, I'm an ICU nurse. I've been an ICU nurse now for almost a year. And so I thought that I would make a video just kind of letting you guys know kind of what my experience has been as an ICU nurse and what it's like for me working on an ICU floor, in case anybody is interested in going into ICU, or you just want to know if you're a nursing student and you're like, I don't know where I want to be when I become a nurse. I thought this would give you just a little bit of insight. So let me give you a little bit of background. I've been a nurse for 2 years now, and I initially worked for a year on a PCU floor, and then I worked for a year on an ICU floor. So I've kind of been in critical care for my 2 years of nursing experience, and I thought that I would go ahead and let you guys know what it's like in case you guys do feel like ICU nursing is for you. So without any further ado, let's get into the video. All right, so first things first, ICU nursing is intensive care nursing. ICU stands for the intensive care unit, so that is the critical care floor. It's ICU and PCU, and those two are critical care floors. I was a PCU nurse for a year, and I worked in the same hospital on the same floor when I was a tech. So I was a tech for since 2017, and then I think I became a nurse in 2018, 2019. I'm really not sure with my dates, but anyways, I worked on the PCU floor for about 3 years. As a tech, and then I transitioned into a nurse, and then I got another job at another hospital on the ICU floor, and there I work ICU and PCU because both nurses can do the same thing. So ICU nursing definitely is not an easy thing. If you think you're going to go into ICU nursing and it's going to be super easy and super chill, that's definitely not what it is. So, if that's what you're thinking, if you want to go into a floor or a specialty that is kind of like a little bit more laid back, ICU nursing is definitely not laid back. I was working ICU nursing during this pandemic, during COVID. So that's a whole nother different story for me. And so I've seen a lot of craziness and a lot of busyness. So as you know, for this pandemic, hospitals all over the place have been super short. And so sometimes in the ICU now, we do get more patients than we actually should. So usually in ICU nursing, it's a 2-to-1. So you get 2 patients to 1 nurse. Sometimes you get a 1-to-1, but that's really rare unless they're on like CRRT. Or really that's it. Really, that's the only way that we get a 1-to-1 patient in the ICU where I am at. So normally it's 2-to-1. So two ICU patients to 1 nurse. I have sometimes been getting 3-to-1, and I've even seen some nurses who get 4 ICU patients to 1 nurse, which is absolutely not safe. But nursing is very short right now with everything that's going on. And so I guess you do the best that you can. So basically in ICU nursing, the type of patients that I have patients who are very critical sometimes, and sometimes I have patients who aren't very critical, who are just in ICU because they came out of a certain surgery, they came out of brain surgery, and they need Q1 hour neuro checks. But then sometimes I do have patients who are very critical, who are intubated, who are on multiple pressors, other drips, who are for sedation, paralytics, and things like that. I have had 3 patients who have been intubated, who have been sedated, who have been paralyzed, and it is a lot of work. In the ICU, you do chart Q2 hours. So you do your assessment every 2 hours, and then you do vitals every hour. And you need to make sure, if you cannot do anything, you need to make sure that you stay up on your vitals and your I's and O's. In my hospital, we use Cerner, and so we have a program called iAware, and that's where all of our I's and O's get transferred over so we can put them into the chart. So basically, I's and O's would be any medications that they're on, any pressors like Neo, Levo, Epi, Vaso, whatever they're on, they get transferred over into iAware because you scan the pump and then you scan the medication and it just gets transferred in over to that. So you make sure you click the intake that you've had for the hour and it gets transferred over into your chart. You also do need to record output every hour. So most of the patients, obviously, if they're intubated, they do have Foley's in place. So you need to record output every hour and you need to do their vital signs every hour. Now, if they're on pressors, when I say pressors, those are medications to help with blood pressure. So usually the most common pressors that we use on my floor in my hospital, we use norepinephrine, which is Levophed. We use vasopressin. We use Neo, phenylephrine, and those medications help to bring the blood pressure up. So most patients can be on multiple pressors or they can be on just one pressor. It just depends on how their blood pressure is functioning at the time. Most of the time, most of our ICU patients have A lines, which are arterial lines that go in the arteries. So they're usually either radial, sometimes they have them in the femoral artery, but most of the time we've had patients that have radial A lines. And those just measure the blood pressure a little bit more accurately than doing it with a cuff. So usually that's what we go off of when we are watching our blood pressure. And when we are watching our blood pressure, when they're on pressors, we want to make sure that their MAP is greater than 60. Their pressure could be 80/40. And if they have a MAP of 65, then it's okay. You know what I mean? We really, really want to watch more so our MAP, our mean arterial pressure, as opposed to what the numbers are. So this kind of gets a little bit tricky, and this is where you kind of have, every person is different, so you kind of have to finagle a little bit. Some people are more sensitive to pressures, some people are not. Some people you have to titrate slowly up, some people you have to like hit it and go quick, and some people, you know, you just have to find a sweet spot. Most of these people, if they are intubated, they are also on other types of medications such as propofol. Sometimes they're on Versed. Sometimes we have patients who are on fentanyl or Dilaudid PCAs. We have patients who are on Nimbex, which is a paralytic. And so there's multiple drugs that they are getting that also affect their blood pressure. So you definitely have a lot of critical thinking to do. Sometimes it's difficult. You know, I've only been doing it a year and it is super hard for me still. And I think it definitely takes a long time, and I definitely ask a lot for help because I don't know everything, and I'm not ashamed to ask for help because I'm not trying to kill nobody. You know what I'm saying? Like, what the hell? But yeah, also if they're intubated and their vent keeps going off, sometimes you need to know whether you need to suction the patient or reposition the patient if the patient is hypoxic, if they're not getting enough O2. And different things like that. We have respiratory there, so that's a little bit easier. Sometimes if they're just wilding out on the vent or if they're bucking the vent because they are not sedated enough or whatever the case may be, I just call respiratory and they are super helpful. And I do get a lot of information from respiratory as well. We do also have patients who are on trachs, who do have tracheostomies. So basically it's like a tube in their airway, and sometimes they are vented as well, or sometimes we have them on humidified O2. I do not like working with trachs just because secretions for me are a big freaking no, and suctioning patients with trachs and like, oh my God. Sometimes they have so many secretions, especially being on humidified air, that it's crazy. So that's another thing, you know, sometimes people can blow out the inner cannula and you got to like really know what to do in that type of situation. ICU, obviously most of those patients are total care patients, and we rarely usually have a tech. So we definitely need to, like, all of our coworkers definitely try to help each other out in bathing our patients and turning our patients. You want to turn them Q2 hours so they don't have a bed sore or anything like that. And, you know, just making sure you take care of them. Sometimes it's just difficult. You know, sometimes the patients are very critical and it's definitely hard to get everything done that you want to get done, even in 12 hours, especially with the charting, because it's just so much charting and it is difficult. And then when you have 3 patients on top of that, I've had nights where I've had 3 ICU patients intubated and one's blood pressure is freaking tanking and going through the roof, and I'm trying to find their sweet spot, and then my other patients are just, they're bucking the vent or they're not sedated enough. And it's been crazy nights, and honestly it is a lot, and it is very, very stressful. So, and that's just, you know, not just with COVID going on, but just being an ICU nurse in general. It's definitely a high stress job. At my hospital, we do need to get labs. So sometimes we get our own labs. We don't have lab techs who come and draw labs or anything like that. So sometimes, luckily where I'm at, most of the people, they have picks and central lines. So it's easy to pull labs from that. But sometimes I do need to poke people. So, and sometimes people have like Q3-hour renal panels if we're checking their sodium or whatever the case may be. So that's also a difficult thing. It's definitely very, very important to stay very organized when you are in the ICU, and especially if you have 3 patients, because it's just, you can definitely get behind very quickly and feel like you are drowning. And that happens to me a lot. I mean, sometimes I just need help. So we definitely at my hospital deal with a lot of patients who do come out of surgeries that do need to go into the ICU. We have cranie patients, which means that they have had a craniotomy, awake craniotomies, which basically is like going into their brain to fix something. So we've had patients who have craniotomies who need to come to our floor, and they're in ICU because they need Q1-hour neuro checks, just to make sure that nothing is going south. So basically, you know, we check their orientation, make sure that they know where they are. We check to make sure that their pupils are equal and reactive and they haven't gotten bigger or smaller. We make sure that we check their grip strength and their movement of their extremities and all that type of stuff. And we have to do that Q1-hour, and that needs to be charted Q1-hour. So that's another thing. And those patients need to have, basically we call it like an aperture. So it's a big camera where they're watched 24/7 to make sure that nothing crazy happens or they're trying to pick off leads or anything like that. And we've had some crazy cranie patients, so that gets kind of crazy, and which is reasonable. You can't be upset with them because they have brain tumor or something and they've just had their brain drilled into. We do have codes and things. You know, we have patients who go to RRTs. I've had patients who have come down from a code and they're just down in ICU. Basically, they're basically just in the ICU because they are now a DNR and we need to keep them alive for until their family gets here, because obviously there's no visiting now due with COVID and stuff like that. So I just had a patient like that last week who, he was an RRT. They called the wife, they made him a DNR, and he just came down to me at 3 o'clock in the morning just so we can keep him alive until his wife got there so she can make him CMO. So for that type of thing, we put him on Levofed because his pressure was super low. Gave him some sodium bicarb to try and correct his pH. And we put him on a high flow nasal cannula. And that's, you know, basically it. We drew his labs. And then when his wife came, we took everything down because she had made him CMO. Sometimes we get patients who are still a code and we are coding them for a good minute. So it's definitely crazy in the ICU. It's definitely much crazier, especially now with COVID and COVID patients. Sometimes the COVID patients, you know, they're intubated. Sometimes they're walkie-talkie and they're good to go. So it just depends. But the ICU is definitely not for the faint of heart, I think you would say. We've had people new nurses who are brand new baby nurses, and they come and they train in the ICU. We trained for 12 weeks, so I got trained for 12 weeks, and they train in the ICU, and then they're on their own, and they're like, I can't do this, and they've transferred. So it's definitely not an easy thing. Even me being a nurse for 2 years and kind of being in critical care and working with patients that acute, it's still definitely hard. But it definitely is somewhere where you will learn a lot. I have learned a lot, and I continue to learn a lot. And I definitely like that portion of it. I have good coworkers who always are there to help, and the doctors and the ARPs who are there at night are amazing, and they're a big help. And so that's definitely one thing that I suggest. If you do think of going into the ICU, make sure that you get to know your team members and the doctors, because especially at night, they're the only ones that you have. We don't have the resources that people have on day shift, so it's a little bit more difficult. So also, if you're thinking of definitely getting into the ICU, I would say start learning, you know, most of the medications and the drips that they use in the ICU. Make sure you learn your heart rhythms, because that's super important. and just make sure that you're ready to like grind out, because ICU is no joke. But I think that is it for today and talking about intensive care nursing. If you guys have any questions, make sure that you leave them down in the description box below. I will leave my Instagram down there. That's probably the best way to get to me. I'm here to help. If you have any questions at all, let me know. I love you guys very much. Thank you for joining me on my channel. If you aren't subscribed yet, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below, and I will see you guys in my next one. Adios.